So, why is often so hard for us to show our authentic selves, even in safe spaces?
I think because we are exquisitely sensitive human beings, and our body remembers those times when we felt rejected, not good enough, and we feel that psychological threat in our body, and it makes us scared to show our authentic selves. We're wired for belonging, and that's very closely linked to our survival. I can be who I am without letting that anxiety derail me. And one of my favorite quotes is from Socrates, who said that unexamined life is not worth living. So I just really try to live by that.
Hello and welcome to Ego Was Here. Today I'm joined by psychologist Mary Starks, whose work with actors and creatives opens a deeper dialogue about ego, identity, and the human need to be seen. Hello, Mary.
Hello.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
Thank you. Mary, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us exactly what you do and how you started working with creatives and artists?
Mm. Well, my name is Mary Starks. I'm a psychotherapist in Santa Monica. And when I moved to LA in 2018, I just naturally started having more creatives in my practice, and I really enjoyed working with them. So I developed a specialty in working with people in the entertainment profession who have a history of childhood trauma. And this interest has led me to also get into the space of well-being facilitation for film and TV. And a group of psychologists and therapists and myself went to London in September to be trained by 6 Feet from the Spotlight to learn how we can bring well-being facilitation to the US.
That's so nice. So nice. So,
Thank
Mary, do you
you.
think people in general truly know who they are? Or do we mostly identify with the roles we play in life?
Generally, I think we do have an intuitive sense about who we are, and we can be stable across all different settings and contexts and roles. Some people can struggle with this more.
Mm.
Personally, I can struggle with this a little more. And one example I have is from this morning, actually. I was going for a walk and I felt like I was going to have a panic attack and I was going to throw up and I wanted to die. And I was thinking about this podcast this morning. And I almost wanted to just, cancel my morning, which was taking my daughter to school on her bike. But then I just took a deep breath and was able to reflect on, okay, where is this coming from? And it's coming from this experience I had actually in 2012 when I did my very first podcast audio interview with someone over LinkedIn. And her style was very new agey, and I'm more scientific. But
Hmm.
she asked me a question, and I answered in line with a new age answer, even though it wasn't really who I truly was. And my older brother, George, who I really respect and admire, heard this interview and he was really critical towards me for that. And that just crushed me. I felt so bad. I felt so rejected and ashamed. Um, but then later, in conversation with him, he was actually mean towards me because he was acting from his own place of insecurity, that he had actually done this same thing on an interview of his own and made this same mistake. So, a lot of my anxiety was stemming from this experience of just feeling so anxious and shamed of being judged again, because we're so exquisitely sensitive and those experiences stay with us. But I was able to just ground myself in who I am and differentiate. Okay, that was a different time and place. Um, it's not the case now, and I don't have to um, not take my daughter to school on her bike, which is something that we've recently started as
Mhm.
part of a lifestyle change. So I can still take her to school. I don't have to change my day because of my state of mind. Um, Another example I think of this is um, an interview with Hugh Grant. He was talking about being an Oompa Loompa on Willy Wonka and how degrading that experience was. But that he had a lot of kids that he has to support. And he was just like very nonchalant about it. Yeah, it was kind of degrading, but this is what I have to do and that's okay. So it felt like he was hanging on to himself despite being in this role that maybe he didn't have the greatest feelings about, but he was still able to do it and deliver it well.
You know, I think we're all used to thinking that a psychologist would have all the right tools, to manage a panic attack. So, listening to you saying that you had this huge panic attack, um, for me, it is very liberating because I myself struggle with anxiety. So sometimes, you feel weird, you feel like you don't have the strength to persuade yourself to take control. And listening to you saying that you also suffer with anxiety, you're dealing with panic attacks. As a psychologist, what tools do you use? Do you have some more tools?
Um, well, I think the number one tool is just reflective functioning, just being able to reflect and locate yourself. What am I feeling right now? And contextualize that in the moment. Um, and then there is like one certain meditation that I do
Hmm.
that's distinctive to me. And that helps ground me. And then just thinking about, okay, of course I would feel anxious because of that history and being portkeyed back to that place of shame. But that's not the case now. I can be who I am without letting that anxiety derail me. And one of my favorite quotes is from Socrates, who said the unexamined life is not worth living. So
Oh,
I just really try to live by that.
nice. Mary, how would you describe the difference between a healthy ego and an ego that takes control?
So rather than seeing things in terms of health or non health, I tend to look at things from a perspective of feelings and needs. And in this case, a controlling ego, I look at why, what necessitates the need to control, what dangers are lurking below for that person. It's often it's around themes of safety and fear that drive us to control. A good example of this is Louis B. Mayer, of course, who was the head of MGM, and he worked very hard to control the public's perception of his stars, having a team of fixers and plants and enforcers ready to change the narrative, to make sure that the actor's humanity didn't puncture their public persona. And he did this because he felt he needed to preserve the public's idealization of the actor, or else people wouldn't want to go to the movies. He was scared of losing control over this. So I
Hmm.
look at that question like, what's the fear? Why the need to control?
So, why is often so hard for us to show our authentic selves, even in safe spaces?
I think because we are exquisitely sensitive human beings, and our body remembers those times when we felt rejected, not good enough, and we feel that psychological threat in our body, and it makes us scared to show our authentic selves. We're wired for belonging, and that's very closely linked to our survival.
Hmm. Hmm. And what happens inside of us when we build an identity around how others see us instead of who we truly are?
I think that we can come to feel very empty inside, even like there's a deadness inside of us. In Demi Moore's memoir, Inside Out, which I think is one of the best memoirs I've ever read, she talks about her journey um, from the beginning and her journey to now and coming to know herself and coming to accept herself and show up authentically.
Hmm. What is the psychological cost of constantly seeking approval or recognition? And I'm
Um,
sure that
yeah,
happens with creatives a lot,
yeah,
and who are in the entertainment industry. There's so much competition, so you constantly think that you have to prove yourself over and over again.
right. Well, it can lead us to feeling just very dissatisfied, unhappy. Carl Jung said, "We're happiest when we're being who we are." I do have a client who gave me his permission to use his story because I
Hmm.
think it's such a compelling example of this. And he's an actor. And when he was around 4 years old, he was driving in the car, and his mom asked him, "Who is the prettiest mother?" And he said, "Mrs. Brown." And he felt her sense of self deflate, and he was very uncomfortable. He felt like he did something wrong. He
Mm.
felt a lot of shame, and his whole through much of his adult life, in his romantic relationships, he was erasing himself and conforming, accommodating to what he thought the woman wanted to boost her ego. So the cost is that you can get alienated from yourself. It can impact your relationships, your career. People feel you at a distance. Um, he's made really good use of the therapy, and he's really come into being for himself and start to bring himself, his true self, into relationships and value what he brings. So he's experiencing more success and life satisfaction in general on all fronts. And he's in his 60s, which tells us it's never too late.
No, no, it's never too late. Yes, I truly believe that. So, why do you think the need to be seen or validated is such a powerful force in human nature?
This is a core human need that we all have, being seen and validated. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about this wiring that we need to belong for our survival. We're wired for connection. We're wired to share ourselves with others, to be known, not to
Wow.
live in isolation.
Yes. Can someone ever reach a point where they no longer crave validation from others, or is that need part of being human?
I think that need is definitely part of being human. Um, that word crave has a connotation to it of addiction, like it's something we need to survive, and our whole sense of self can rest on that external need for validation.
Mhm.
But we can continue to validate ourselves internally, even if the external world is not showing us validation in that moment. Um, One example of this that comes to mind is, I know someone who's both a sergeant in the police department and a trained psychoanalyst, and he
Mhm.
used to work in hospice, and he was telling me how people who are content with themselves, they're still content with themselves even after receiving a terminal diagnosis, that their sense of self doesn't change, even though the external conditions might.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, but how can we learn to feel worthy without external success or recognition?
I think through self acceptance, self esteem doesn't come from praise, it comes from self acceptance. And traveling this journey towards what does that look like for us? What events in our lives have shaped our personality and the way that we turned out? And how can we connect with ourselves even after we've disconnected from ourselves, like I did this morning, and ground ourselves in who we are? When we remember who we are, we can get back to ourselves, even if we're facing a lot of criticism or disapproval from the outside. Living our values gives us integrity, and that can help us with meaning and purpose and give us the fortitude to move forward, even though we might not be getting that approval.
Yes. But practically, how can you accept your flaws? How can you make peace with everything that you don't like about yourself?
Well, we are humans, so we inherently are flawed and make mistakes. We can strive to improve upon those things about us that we don't like, and that can give us meaning in and of itself.
Hmm. So, what's the difference between being seen and being understood?
I think being understood means that someone has empathy and that they can appreciate our experience, even if they disagree, and they can dwell into our state of mind just a little bit, not too much where they get lost in it, but that they can really integrate it
Yeah, yeah.
into their view of us.
We often feel anxiety, burnout, and overstimulation. From your perspective, what is the root of so much emotional exhaustion
Mm.
today?
Well, from my perspective, I think not valuing ourselves enough to fill up our emotional cup consistently. And typically that means being with other people in our lives, sharing our pain with other people who can truly welcome us in and be with us in the good, bad, and the ugly. That restores our energy. It re-energizes us to go back out in the world, and we can get so caught up in meeting other people's expectations and achieving this, that, or the other that we forget about ourselves. And that can be exhausting, to forget about what it is that we need to do to
Mm.
stay resilient. Um, for me, there's a few things, going to the beach, going to hot yoga, connecting with people that I love. Without those things, I feel so exhausted and frayed, dissociated. But if I have those things in place, then I can bear the catastrophe of the human condition much better.
And how does comparison, especially through social media, uh, affect our self-esteem and inner peace?
Comparison can make us feel so inadequate. It can pulverize our self esteem. It can keep us stuck in this shame cycle. I believe the only person that I want to compare myself to is the person I was yesterday. There may
Wow.
be people that I see, um, that they have something that I want, but I can use that as motivation to try to get that myself without having it make me feel bad about myself.
Yeah. Yes. In your experience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about happiness?
That we will be happy when we have this, that, or the other fame, fortune, the Porsche, a house in the hills, thousand Labubus, whatever it is.
And it never
That's
stops. Yeah.
that staying in our comfort zone is going to make us happy, or that we have to be happy all the time, that being happy means being free from pain.
Mhm. Do you think people are more disconnected from themselves today than in the past?
Yes, and I definitely do. I think technology has contributed to that. Then it feels like the networks are frenetically trying to keep us on the couch watching something. Our children have way too much screen time. This is part of the reason why me and my daughter ride her bike to school. Sometimes I imagine the Amish in Pennsylvania sitting on their porch, whittling wood, eating apple cobbler, just being with each other, watching the sunset, and my soul yearns for that, and I try to create more of that in my own life.
Yes. So tell me, Mary, how can someone begin to reconnect with who they are beneath all the noise, labels, and expectations?
Um, well, it's gonna be different for everyone. Um, this reflective functioning, like I talked about before, being able to recognize, okay, I'm not feeling okay right now. Am I getting lost in all the noise, labels, and how can I get back to myself? Because when we get back to ourselves, then the game can change. When we can connect with who we are, it's like we can go back and do what we have to do confidently. Some movement or is really important. I think that resets our
Mm,
nervous system, moving or being in nature. I think just having gone to the beach every week, I think it does something to my biology, because when I don't go to the beach, I notice it. I I feel differently in my body. So I think nature, being around children,
Mhm,
finding something that you like to do that helps you get rid of all that noise. For me, it's hot yoga, being in that hot room. I can just find myself there.
mhm. Do you believe that creativity has the power to heal emotional wounds, even for people who don't consider themselves artists?
Yeah, yes, Anna, definitely. There's a whole profession dedicated to this, in fact, art therapy.
Hmm.
Um, Doing art helps us access a part of our brain that we don't typically access in the day to day. It can help us feel emotions and connect emotions with the past, and it's very cathartic. For me, I like to write, and that form of self expression um, is very healing.
Yes. What do you think drives people to create? Is it a form of self expression or a search for meaning?
Well, I think that there are certain personalities um, that are driven more to create, that these are part of their unique gifts to the world. The INFP on the Myers Briggs, the 4 on the Enneagram, these personality types have a deep sensitivity where creation comes natural, creating in some form or fashion, and it helps them function at their best.
Hmm. Many artists say that their greatest work came from their deepest pain. Why do you think suffering can be so transformative?
I think that when we confront those scary places inside of us, the dark and scary places, we're encountering our true selves. And that can be healing. We're wired to access these parts of ourselves and share it. I think when art, when it's made through encountering our own suffering, also shows up in the quality of the art that is made. It's like it's infused with our soul, and that can resonate with the audience, and that's what makes it so powerful
Yes,
and
yes,
transformative, that we can bring the essence of our soul to art. I think that's miraculous.
yes, yes, it is. Can emotional pain exist without turning into suffering if we learn how to hold it differently?
Yeah, definitely. Emotional pain can absolutely ease into something else where it doesn't feel like suffering anymore, where it can soften and open. And that can happen when we can share that pain with someone who can be an emotional home for that pain, where
Hmm.
it can just exist without judgment, but just acceptance and curiosity.
And how does one begin to make peace with the parts of themselves that have been rejected or hidden?
Um, well, I think again, first just wanting to make peace with those places that have been rejected or hidden is the first step, and allowing those rejected or hidden parts to find the light of day, to and to have tenderness and for those parts, to make a home for them ourselves, and to bring them into our experience to integrate those parts of ourselves that make us whole.
Hmm. Do you think we are our worst enemies?
I think that we can be. Definitely, we can self-sabotage. Um, we wanna stay in our comfort zone. We wanna stay within what we're used to, but that may not be the healthiest for us, and that may hold us back.
Hmm. And why do we get stuck in our comfort zone? Just because it's familiar? Is that the reason mainly?
Well, we all have a blueprint inside of us, an attachment blueprint or an inner working model of relationships that's formed early on and is formed by thousands of interactions we have every day. And as adults, we may find that this blueprint is holding us back and is problematic in some ways. So we try to build new associations and meanings to create a new blueprint. I have, I guess, a linguistic example of this, and
Hmm.
that is the fact that I'm from Utah. And in Utah, certain words we don't know how to pronounce the T's.
Hmm.
And this word button, I pronounce it button, and I was doing a presentation to some early childhood educators in Arizona, and the name of the workshop was called Hot Buttons, and I just kept saying buttons, buttons all over the place, and people were laughing, and I was like, "Why are they laughing? I don't understand." And then it wasn't until afterwards I realized, oh, they were making fun of me because I was saying button. But I did not even think about that, like, 1 iota while I was doing that presentation. I just this is what I do. I don't know anything else. But now, if I do a presentation, I'm very conscious of the fact that people are listening to me, and I wanna pronounce it in the customary way. And so I'm making a conscious effort to say button. So we can do that same thing with
Hmm.
other parts of our life.
Yes. How do our relationships mirror our unhealed parts?
Um, well, I think like in that compelling example of the actor who early on learned that he needed to appease his mother and to make her feel good. He did that throughout all of his subsequent romantic relationships, and that represented an unhealed part of himself that he needed to accept himself authentically and not change himself to conform to the wishes
Hmm.
of his partner. That, in fact, his partner wants him to be himself. She doesn't want him to accommodate to her ego. He wants to embrace that part of himself, which he has learned to do. And so he's not gripped by this fear that if he's himself, that he just says what comes to mind, Mrs. Brown, that that's not going to be met with rejection or shame.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. Why do people often repeat the same emotional patterns, even when they're aware of them?
Well, I think just because this takes a lot of time and we often need someone to watch over us as we learn something new. We need to make mistakes in a safe place. And we need to check in with someone and share with someone what we're learning. That's how new connections are formed by repetition. And it takes a long time to, first of all, find out, what we need to work on.
Yeah.
And then after that, we need to find someone that we can learn with that's a good fit for us. And often that does take shape in the form of psychotherapy. I remember when I went to the Hollywood in Mind Summit last year,
Uh-huh.
and Angel Carter was there speaking about her new show, The Carters, and she came from a lot of trauma, and the fame that her family went through catapulted them into this very dangerous place. And Nick Carter from the Backstreet Boys, of course, sat down their whole family, all the siblings, I think there were 5 of them, and said, "Who wants therapy?" And she raised her hand, she said, "Yes, I want therapy." And both her and Nick are the only surviving siblings in her family, and they're the ones who received therapy. So they were able to find a kind of home to work through their painful experiences and find themselves through all of that.
Yes. What role does self-compassion play in personal transformation?
Well, I think self-compassion is a crucial role, and I don't think that we get to a place of transformation unless we have self-compassion.
Mhm. And I think it's the hardest thing to finally be able to make peace with yourself and make peace with your flaws and accept them and see all these patterns that you keep repeating just
Yeah.
because you don't want to uh, get out of your comfort zone. Um,
Mhm.
how can we learn to be present with ourselves in moments of discomfort?
Well, I really like this metaphor of shark music, and I use it a lot, and I think about it a lot, and it comes from the founders of Circle of Security, who developed this parenting program which broke down attachment theory into very easy to understand language for parents. It's not a parenting program that teaches a parent how to parent, but how to build a secure attachment relationship. And they use this metaphor of shark music to describe the fear and discomfort that we have that can come up in relationships. And that shark music, of course, was inspired by Jaws, because
Mhm.
when we hear the frenetic violin, we get scared a little bit inside. Like there's this deep association to that music. And so in relationships, we can hear that shark music, and it can make us be mean or weak or gone. And gone, of course, is numbing ourselves or
Mm.
escaping that discomfort somehow. So being able to recognize, when is that shark music playing? Okay, for me this morning, it was blaring on my walk, and just being able to, like, have some tenderness for it. Of course, I would be anxious. Let me choose how I want to respond to this. I
Uh-huh.
don't have to react out of my default, which is to kind of get dysregulated and stay dysregulated to the point where I don't want to take my daughter to school on her bike because I just want to sit in the bed. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show up anyway. I'll be okay through this. So I think that reflective functioning is really key. Being able to pause and hold ourselves through those moments of wanting to numb ourselves or escape or be mean or weak or whatever it is, and knowing, like, what is it that we tend to do? I
Mhm.
tend to go gone in some way, like the example from this morning, but we can override that with reflection.
Mhm. Mary, tell me, what is your biggest struggle emotionally?
Oh, yeah, I think that my biggest struggle emotionally, is with this shark music. It is with being who I am, even when I'm feeling that shark music, because that can really derail someone, in a variety of ways. So just being my true self, the ways that we can be mean, weak, or gone, that is like our false self. And this metaphor of shark music
Mhm.
is also a metaphor for intergenerational transmission of trauma and how trauma can get passed down through generation to generation and manifest in these ways. So that's my biggest struggle is staying reflective, being aware of when that shark music is happening and overriding it
Uh-huh.
so that
Mhm.
I can be my true self and I can
Yes.
have behavior that's goal directed and in line with who I am and who I want to be and what I'm striving for, not show up like I'm swimming in those shark waters.
Yes. Yes. We all know how those moments feel. So, if you could give one piece of advice to anyone listening to live more authentically and peacefully, what would that be?
Well, that would be to reflect on what is that shark music for you. There's different ways you can do this. Typically, in some context of some psychotherapy, but not always. It can be with anyone, any close relationship
Mhm.
can inspire us and move us to that higher end self where we're engaging our whole brain, our frontal lobe, which is where our personality is and our executive functioning, and moves us out of that reptilian and monkey brain. But that's what makes us truly human is when we're using this frontal lobe here. And that comes with being in relationship with others and really connecting on a human, real, authentic level,
Yes.
feeling held and seen and known. And that moves us to do better and to be better.
And some practical tools that we can use at times when, you know, everything seems to be going wrong.
Well, of course, just monitoring yourself inside and checking in with yourself. Am I feeling okay or not okay? And I'm not feeling okay. Let me try to contextualize that right now and
Mhm.
have some tenderness and understand that instead of just persevering without any reflection. Because I think that's where we get in trouble when we dismiss our own anxiety or distress.
Yes. Yes. And have the courage to ask for help if we need to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We can't do this alone. And we're wired for connection. We're wired to be with others and to have secure relationships, not relationships that are filled with fear or anxiety or discourage us from being ourselves.
Hmm. So, Mary, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our discussion. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Anna. I enjoyed it as well.
And to all of you, remember, ego was here, you were here, and that's enough.